Azad, if I can come to you, how would you respond to the charge of Muslims are always whining and portraying themselves as victims, and actually initiatives like this just reinforce that perception?
Yeah, I'd like to also mention a couple of points before that, because I thought you were going to come back to me. I didn't hear what Fiyaz had to say. I don't know, for some reason I can't hear what he said.
Well, Fiyaz said that he would be happy to engage and be proactive with engaging with organisations like yourselves, as well as the other ones that you mentioned.
Well, that's good. One of the points I wanted to mention, I think it might have been Nargis who's mentioned it, which is that who should be collecting this data?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's well and good that other people are collecting it, charities are collecting it, that's fine. But it is the primary duty of the police to do that. We've been working with the Metropolitan Police who've agreed to do this. It's on their crime recording system now. There is a specific hate crime called Islamophobia, which they record crimes against. But this hasn't been rolled out nationally. We approached the Home Office asking them to do the same thing. The buy-in is there at ACPRO, the president of ACPRO, Sir Hewald, he agrees with it. You know, the issue is the political will isn't there and the finance isn't there to align all the different crime recording systems around the country. That's number one. Until that is done, the community is not going to see it, as Nargis mentioned, that this is being taken seriously. Because why do I want to report? We did a whole series of events about reporting it as a crime, you know, making third-party reporting centres, masjids and other places. But at the end of the day, an individual, when they feel that a crime has taken against them or was committed against them, they want to report it to the police, and that's where it should be. That's number one. Number two, I think, you know, we are missing the wider debate here, which you alluded to, which is Islamophobia is not understood or is not treated in the same way. If you look at how media stories are spun, if you look at how government speaks, like, for example, the current government will engage, and I'm sure if Fiyaz is willing, he can make it very clear today, this whole project excluded certain people. It excluded certain organisations because the government does not like those organisations.
Which organisations? Would you name them? Which organisations do you feel were deliberately excluded?
I can name Muslim Safety Forum as one of them. The government, this project that they're doing, the Muslim Safety Forum has been actually working on it. It is actually an idea of the Muslim Safety Forum to collate this data with the police. But our emphasis was that we get the police to do it first, and primarily because this is the job of the police. So we are missing the government politics that is being played here, and we shouldn't.
And why would they exclude an organisation like yourselves if your claim is that you were deliberately excluded?
Because under the current government's approach, there are some Muslims that are worthy of engagement and some that aren't.
Fiyaz, how would you answer to that charge?
I mean, I think I can't answer the government's charge of what they want to work with or who they don't want to work with. I think that's for the government to answer. I think there's a couple of key points here that need to be mentioned again. The data it's not even about data. I think victim support is the starting point. There are women, predominantly women, who are suffering the abuse on a daily basis in the UK, and that issue needs to be collected. It's separate to an integration debate. It links
You're saying it's separate, but even the issue of hijab and niqab has been very much inflamed by politicians. And then when we see these incidents on the streets, there is this complete distancing.
It's separate, but it's linked. It's linked because it is part of the wider debate, but there's the functional bit of collecting the attacks needs to be done. That's as simple as that. Ideally,
and why shouldn't the police? I mean,
ideally,
at the moment we have a situation that the Metropolitan Police has agreed to a set of protocols. Why isn't that being rolled out nationally?
Ideally, the police should be the ones that everyone reports to, but there are a number of factors why people are not reporting into the police. So actually, until that happens, there needs to be a push and a drive to collect and to integrate data and to get the police also to have something that they can compare against, and also for them to be driven in the approach to collect that.
But still haven't quite answered why the police haven't rolled this out nationally and why the political will for that hasn't taken place.
I can't answer what for the police or the political will. All I can say is there is a vacuum, there is a gap that needs to be filled. I'm not saying that we can provide 100% fill, that wouldn't be accurate, but at least driving the police and working with them in this engagement is important. The MSF has tried and other organisations have tried, and I think it's important for other actors to also to try in that arena. I think that's important. The other thing, if I can just finish off by saying, I mean, the politics of any government are the politics of any government. Again, there may be different politics that are involved. Our role is pretty clear. Get down to the grassroots as best as we can. Work with individuals who are having those issues across the country as best as we can. Try to map and collect and also assess what's happening in the country. When the EDL marches, we need to see the impact of that in the local area. We need to see the kind of threats that are made. We need
and
to
again, the community would say that the police turn out in huge numbers. A lot of public money is used in containing these marches, as it were. And yet the same effort, same political will, the same even bureaucratic involvement does not take place when it comes to actually assessing the impact on the community, which is being directly attacked in this instance.
And I would agree.
And it's all very well for charities to get involved.
I would agree.
But surely it's a job of government and the authorities to be doing this.
I would absolutely agree with you. I'm not going to disagree because it's true. The other fact, if I can say, in this process is that there are members of the police force who regard the EDL as not being a far-right group. There are issues that the police have that I completely disagree with.
Put that to notice. When I was witness as a councillor myself when the EDL first came to Birmingham, where the police actually did a press conference and read out the line from the EDL's website saying they're a non-racist organisation. Hopefully things have moved on from that and there is a more robust response. But even then, it hasn't quite got to the point where I think the community feels that their genuine concern about their safety is being taken on board by the authorities whose job it is to protect them.
I mean, I think it is very sort of grey in terms of how over the last few years the police, even politicians, how they have reacted to the changes that we're seeing at grassroots level, whether that may be EDL marches or whether it's the BNP getting councillors elected. For me, I think it goes back to, I mean, I don't have a vested interest in any of the work that's sort of going on here, and I've known Fiyaz for a number of years, and I know that he'll sort of take forward whatever work it is with sort of integrity. I think for me what is important is that, so that we can actually get away from this sort of grey area that we often come up against, whether it's in local government or national government, is that actually there needs to be something that is around having a national accountability. It goes back to knowing how decisions are made, and that then sits with the sort of the police as well. And that, I think that where you have that transparency in how decisions are made, how particular groups are viewed, or, where there's real sort of accountability in terms of how the reporting happens, it shouldn't matter whether there's an EDL march in Bolton or in Tunbridge Wells, because the police will have to deal with it to a certain aspect in the same way. So for me, I think it is about, well, to get away from that greyness in terms of how a police commander in Birmingham might deal with it to how someone in Tunbridge Wells might deal with it, is to ensure that we've got real transparency, that we actually know, what are the parameters here, what are the rules of the game, what are the views on the EDL, and I think that that's where there is a greyness from politicians and from institutions.
Well, we're running out of time on discussing this. If you could just give us the details of where people can contact yourselves if they feel that an attack has taken place or they know that somebody else has been affected by this.
Thank you very much. I mean, at this moment in time, the project will be launched in the third week of January. It is called the Tell Mama campaign, but at the moment, if people are interested in volunteering or even interested in registering something in terms of any attack, they can email us at info@faith-matters.co.uk.
So just repeat the website?
Yep. It's actually www.faith-matters.org, but they can email us on info@faith-matters.
Well, it's come up on the screen
Fantastic.
For our viewers. So do jot that down, and thank you to all our guests. Thank you, Azad, for your time. Thank you, Nargis, and to Fiyaz for being with us. Do join us for the second half. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to part 2 of the Politics and Media Show. In a major ruling which could eventually pave the way for a public inquiry, the Court of Appeal has ruled in favour of over 100 Iraqi civilians who have alleged that British soldiers tortured them. The Iraqis appealed an earlier ruling by the High Court which had backed government claims that an inquiry into whether abuse was systematic was not needed, as a team had already been set up to look into the allegations. But 3 appeal court judges ordered the Defence Secretary to reconsider, and the Ministry of Defence has said it will examine the judgment, I quote, very carefully. 128 Iraqis have claimed that they were victims of torture and degrading treatment by British soldiers and other interrogators in Iraq between 2003 and 2008. With me to discuss this is Khalid Sofi, who chairs the Legal Affairs Committee of the Muslim Council of Britain, welcome to the show. We're also joined in the studio by Faisal Osman, who's a barrister who specialises in public law and cases where a judicial review is needed. Welcome to the show. If I can start with yourself, Faisal, to give a summary for our viewers as to what this case is about and where we're at now.
The summary you gave was actually was very good and very useful. Going back in time slightly, at the start of all of this, over 100 Iraqi citizens complained that whilst they were in detention by British Armed Forces, they were treated inhumanely. To give you a few examples, very oppressive interrogation techniques, on some occasions allegations of hooding, etc., humiliation whilst they were in detention. That's what the complaint was. That went forward to the Ministry of Defence. Earlier court rulings had determined that in fact the Ministry of Defence and the Armed Forces are subject to the Human Rights Act. That's important because part of the state's obligations when it comes to the Human Rights Act is that there has to be an official investigation if allegations such as this are raised, an official investigation by the state. In this case, what happened was that the Ministry of Defence decided that the best way to have that investigation was to form their own team and effectively see what had been presented to them, discuss it, make suggestions and improvements, and any follow-on action afterwards if they discovered that those historic allegations made by the Iraqi claimants were in fact valid and true. That was appealed by the Iraqis who made the complaints on the basis that a team reviewing what had happened should not be associated with the same individuals who are in charge of policing detention in Iraq.
Well, that seems pretty much common sense. And how did the situation arise in the first place? That people who could have links with the very people being accused of the mistreatment were being included in such an investigation. Surely it's been a waste of time to have done this. Well,
it does seem like common sense. What the Ministry of Defence was saying, first of all, is that they weren't shutting the door to full public inquiry. What they were saying was that the team they had set up was sufficiently independent, had sufficient expertise, etc., to make sure that all the claims were properly analysed and looked at, and there wasn't any fear that there would be a lack of independence, and the findings would in any way be contaminated by the fact that the individuals looking at the cases were in some way associated with the individuals who were on the ground who may have committed these acts. Not only that, there are also two other inquiries taking place. The Musa inquiry, the Bar Musa inquiry, which is in relation to his death in custody, which is just reported back. Sir William Gage has made some recommendations and quite some strength, quite heavy-handed comments, strong comments in relation to what should be done. Many of the matters that were covered in that inquiry, the Ministry of Defence were quite confident would answer some of the questions in relation to the other claim that the other claims were bringing up, and therefore would put to one side the need for a full public inquiry in relation to these cases. There's also another inquiry in relation to another individual that was going to take place. So it was that together, the Ministry of Defence saying that those inquiries themselves will deal with a lot of these issues. Not only that, we're not shutting the door on a public inquiry in relation to this. Let's wait and see what happens. And also there's a question of resources. We would effectively be looking at a third public inquiry, and that was disproportionate to what was needed, that being a full review of what had taken place by the independent team that the Ministry of Defence had set up.
Come back into the implications of all of this. The MOD were invited to send a representative, and we have a statement which I can read out, which says, from them, which says, "We note that the Court of Appeal has not ordered a public inquiry, but has asked the Defence Secretary to reconsider how to meet the investigative obligations. We will examine the judgment very carefully and consider next steps."